Speak bold, ain't tripping on the haters. It could take freedom from a cold dead hands. We're locked and loaded for the last dance. 'Cause we're the new American gangsters, ready to die for this land.
Evening, America. Brian James Blem here with Shelby Bush, my sister, live. Want to chat with you today. We got, I think, a pretty interesting conversation to have today with the American people about the security of your elections and how your government and the Democratic Party has actively been gaslighting you, concealing information and evidence about major threats to your elections vis-a-vis the computerized nature of elections. That's why they want elections, because they're easily hacked. So, Shelby, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited about this topic. We've been talking about it, and one of the major things we hear all the time is there's no credible evidence that our systems are vulnerable, that they've been hacked, and right, absolutely. And they know, I think, that the gig is up. I think
Right.
they know more and more Americans recognize that they're full of it.
Yeah.
And that's the other reason why they have to lie about hand counts, right? And create this narrative. And so we're going to talk about that as well today.
Yeah, so the AG, she's just a pawn of, people like Mark Elias and who's that short little dude? My God, Stephen Richards' friend. Norman Eisen. How tall is he? Is he short? I know he looks short.
Well, he definitely has some kind of Napoleon thing going on.
Right,
So
total Napoleon thing going on, right? But, they're working very actively to scare the hell out of people by threatening criminal sanctions against them. We're going to talk about that and how they're absolutely wrong, and that you as voters need to go and stand up and talk to your boards of supervisors and get them to vote to change the structure of their elections, because our elections are hacked time and time again. And there's absolutely nothing your government can do about it, because it might be bad actors in your government actually doing the hacking.
Well, absolutely. And it's definitely at minimum the government that keeps saying they're going to protect us from these hacks, right? You've got organizations like CISA and CIS who they claim that their whole goal is to mitigate this hacking risk.
Yeah.
To identify a threat immediately and stop the hack. But what we're going to talk about today shows they really don't do anything to stop these hacks. And once they occur and they're identified, they talk about them after the fact. But I don't see any evidence that they're actually stopping anything from happening.
Yeah. Well, before we get going, I mean, what do you think about Iran?
Well, it's kind of a complex situation, isn't it? I know that it's been a heated topic for sure. Look, Trump warned Iran. He gave him an ultimatum. He gave him a deadline. Iran chose to not comply and push back, and Trump did what he thought was best in this situation.
Right.
And, it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. We definitely need to be praying for our nation right now.
Right.
Because Iran is pushing back, and I doubt they're going to just roll over and let this go without a fight.
Right.
For sure.
Don't forget to pray for your enemies.
Speaking of, Iran and the whole Palestinian issue, that individual that the courts ordered be released, I guess he was a Columbia student, Palestinian, I think.
Right.
The courts ordered him to be released, and it's my understanding he is already leading protests at Columbia University, calling for an intifada against the West. He's actually leading protests, calling for war against the United States of America and other Western countries.
Well, I believe that there are actors within our government, including our judiciary, that they want that to happen. That's why they want these people released. That's why they want them in our homeland. There's no other reason why they would.
Right.
Except for that's the exact result they want. They want the people that hate this country in this country. I mean, they're creating this culture, this anti-American culture within our own citizens.
Well, I mean, not only that, when these people engage in violence, what does it give the government the power to do? Right. It's just after 2020. How long was it? We had, September 11th, right? How long was it before they passed the Patriot Act? 45 days to pass the most comprehensive, the most far-reaching, the most sweeping spy on American citizen legislation ever passed in the history of this country. I mean, took 45 days for them to pass it, right? And so acts like that give our government an excuse to clamp down, not really on the problem, but on everybody. And
Absolutely.
And that's probably part of why we're at where we're at today. So.
Stricter government, more intrusiveness, more invasiveness. I mean, we started out with the Patriot Act, and then I think, don't quote me, but I think when the people got really worked up about it, they basically codified a lot of the activities and passed another bill to replace the Patriot Act that was even more intrusive. What was that? It was like the Freedom Act or something to that effect.
And if you just read the name of legislation, just know it means the opposite. Right.
Absolutely.
Like, so if it says middle income wage increase, right, that means they're going to screw you long, deep, and hard. So.
Well, that works that way for local legislation too. If it's titled something for helping kids and teachers, then they're going to be the last to get any benefit out of it.
Yeah.
Or I love the affordable housing legislation that basically gives big corporate builders carte blanche over everything and does nothing to actually make housing more affordable.
Nope.
So, you're right.
It just benefits their lobbyists, the corporate interest. Yeah. So we have Kim with us today. Yeah. Well, should we bring her on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let her out of the closet.
So Kimberly's going to come on and join us to talk about the infamous SolarWinds hack. I think a lot of people...
What does that hat say?
Make America great again.
Oh, cool beans.
A lot of people don't realize, I don't think, Kimberly, that the SolarWinds hack affects elections, and that we should be concerned when we think about elections and the timeliness of this and everything that went on with SolarWinds. Do you want to, why don't you start by saying hello to everybody and maybe brief them on kind of the overview of what is SolarWinds?
Well, SolarWinds is a software company, and a lot of companies use it, and they have a product on it called Orion. Orion was actually the product that was compromised. And the big thing to know about that is that the Orion software was hacked on SolarWinds server. It was compiled on SolarWinds server, so they didn't even know that they had bogus code, and they sent that out. And
okay,
so everybody...
Let me sort of walk through this. SolarWinds makes a software called Orion. Somebody hacked into SolarWinds. They jacked with the code in Orion software. They compiled it using SolarWinds compiler, and nobody knew.
Nobody knew.
Why is Orion important?
Orion is a software that a lot of companies use for not backroom, but they're like security software. They do updates and stuff. They send out updates, I think, twice a day, or I don't remember how often it was. But Orion software is used by all of our government.
Wow.
So when they hacked Orion, they hacked us down to our short hairs.
Huh.
They got us.
Yeah, and
They
so
got the
this hacked Orion software was automatically uploaded onto their systems
yes.
because it
Now
came from a
there's a lot of
trusted
systems that
developer.
I'm sorry, what?
Because it came from a trusted developer.
Yes. Everybody just, has it on automatic update and it
Right.
just updates when they get a new one.
So just
Because
like when you're
SolarWinds
using,
is a really big company and it is trusted.
yeah. So just like when you're using Windows, right? You turn it on every now and then, and it
Mhm.
says, "Would you like
Yep.
to update now in 32 years, or maybe tomorrow morning at 2 a.m.?" When will you be when will you be least inconvenienced by the 36 hours you won't be able to use your computer? Right?
Yeah,
It's, and
basically.
people just hit yes, don't they?
Yeah. Well, of course, the people that are going to get it are thinking
Uh-huh.
SolarWinds is safe. And so, yeah, they just trusted it. And
Right.
I don't think everybody that uses Orion actually updated,
Mhm.
but enough did, and our federal government did.
Yeah.
So they got into the VA, they got into all of our federal government.
So did they get into CISA?
Oh yeah, they got into
CISA.
DHS, and then once you're in DHS, you're into anything you want.
Right.
Right. Right.
So they got into the Treasury Department, the Department of Homeland
Mm-hmm.
Security. They got into
Mm-hmm.
the Centers for Internet Cybersecurity, right? Which,
Wow.
what is the irony of that? The
Oh, that's
very
hilarious.
agency that's supposed to oversee the security of
Right.
everything else gets hacked, and in turn, all these other governmental agencies get hacked, right?
Right.
And this information
What?
didn't come out until after the 2020 election, right? That's when it became
Right.
public.
Well, I got
Right.
a
On
question
the
for you
6th.
because last week we talked about the Center for Internet Security, right?
Right.
Did you see that show? You know
Yeah.
who the Center for Internet Security says
Yep.
oversees them? Who?
Yep.
Who?
CISA,
CISA,
isn't
right?
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's CISA.
CISA.
You say
They're
CISA, I
byproduct.
say CISA. And just so we're clear, when we say NSA, we're talking about the National Security Agency. And when we say
Mm-hmm.
CISA, we're talking about the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a department of the NSA
Mm-hmm.
responsible for ensuring that our computer systems throughout the United States are safe and secure and free from hacking, especially and predominantly our elections. Isn't that their primary focus, Kim?
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Well, they
Well,
originally
they talk
started
about
with
it's critical
they,
infrastructure, right? So
yes.
you've got all
Yeah.
these agencies out there that are designed to protect the citizens, right? They're supposed to be in place. Like you've got the Department of Treasury that has all this sensitive data about American
Hmm.
citizens. You've got Department of Homeland Security, which has everything from threats to private confidential information about citizens all across the country. And as Brian pointed out, with the Patriot Act and everything else, they have information about every citizen on so many different things, right? And
Yep.
then you've
Yep.
got CISA, and their job is to protect these agencies from cyber attacks, correct?
Mm-hmm. Well, originally
I think
when they first came on board, when they were created, they were supposed to just be an information sharing hub so that all the other agencies, when they had got hacked or whatever, they could get the information out to all the other agencies. So that when they said that, so it wasn't a silo. That's what they called it. Everybody had their own silos. So CISA was developed to originally just share information. And then of course as time went on, they just kept growing and taking more power for themselves. And well, the censorship, they were the center of creating that. Um, and they overreached, saying that our thoughts were critical infrastructure. So,
Right.
and the elections were not declared critical infrastructure until Jay Johnson did it. And he did it. A lot of states didn't want to be declared critical infrastructure. They didn't want CISA to be in their systems.
They're smart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, CISA is a centralized system. And anytime we centralize anything, we're basically taking all of these vulnerabilities, right? So you take all these different agencies, they're all subject to their own vulnerabilities, and we're funneling them into one channel. So you get through that channel, you get the whole enchilada.
Yep.
And is that
and that's
basically what
CISA.
happened with SolarWinds?
CISA had done vulnerability testing on all the counties before it was hacked with SolarWinds. Well, actually, no, I think it was they were already hacked while they were doing these vulnerability testings. So the SolarWinds was already in effect, and they had convinced the counties that you need us. And
well, let's
so
walk through that, Kimberly. Let's put the timeline up, and then I'm going to kind of go through the basics, but I know you have more information than is really compiled out there. And so I think we should go through the timeline of the SolarWinds hack as we know it publicly. And then I'd like you to elaborate on that, because that's a really interesting point that I want to drive home today. And that is that at the moment the public becomes aware a hack exists is not the moment at which the hack occurred.
Right.
So even though we found out about it in December of 2020, those backdoor channels, these viruses, these malwares were established well in advance of that date, right? And so I want to really zone in on that, because it's a recurring theme that we're noticing, and that is that once it's announced, a lot of damage has already occurred in many cases, right? So, Steve, can you put up image 1, please? Okay, so according to this outline, FireEye discovers the SolarWinds attack on December 13th of 2020. It became public the very next day. And then as time progressed, eventually it was January of 2021 when U.S. intelligence agencies came back and said, okay, we believe it was Russia that did it, and all these government agencies were involved. But when they announced the hack, they came out a little bit later and said this had occurred September of 2019. So that's over a year before the public even became aware, and supposedly before CISA actually became aware that these government agencies were vulnerable. Does that kind of make sense to you, Kimberly? Does that follow along?
Yeah. I would say that to add in a few empty blanks there, in 2018, the SolarWinds password to their sandbox. The sandbox is where they put programs that they're ready to compile and send out. They put it in the sandbox. The password to that sandbox was found on GitHub in 2018. So the hack, they were actually found to have hacked in January of 2019. And the interesting thing about this is that in August, you mentioned that about September 2019, they said it came about. Well, Susan Spalding was on like an all Democratic hearing board talking about the security of elections. And she said that they sent notices to the counties in August, September and October that their registrations were being hacked. And I guess that people were not paying attention, so Jay Johnson ended up making them critical infrastructure. But in a speech, Susan Spalding said, in the spring of 2019, we noticed activity. So she didn't even bother to tell them until August, September, October. And then it became like they were trying to get the counties signed on before November. They really wanted the counties to be signed on.
And
by
they
November.
waited until that occurred, right? So
Yep.
they knew about the hack. They knew the hack had occurred. They knew that this vulnerability was there. And to the best of everyone's knowledge, even to this day, they have not been able to confirm that those vulnerabilities have been fully patched. Yet they push to get every county in the United States under this security infrastructure and wait until after the election before letting the public know that the system was vulnerable.
Right. And
more
here's another
important-
fun fact. The FBI had noticed that they were being hacked about January 2019. No, July 2019. And they traced it down to the SolarWinds, to the Orion software. And SolarWinds said, oh, no, everything's good. It's like back and forth. Oh, no, our code's good. We don't find nothing. They drop it. They don't go any further.
So the FBI knows
So
in July 2019 that SolarWinds been hacked, and it gets swept under the rug. Then they actually hack the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Right?
Yes.
All right. Oh,
Yeah.
now interesting.
And here's another little interesting tidbit. There was a security firm that was called into a quote unquote big think tank. It never named what think tank it is, but I can imagine. And they were called in July 2019 at the same time that the FBI was getting hacked. And they kept booting this hacker out, and they couldn't get him to stay out. He kept coming back. And they couldn't figure out how, so they just unplugged the server. And the guy that the security firm was named Velexity. And after they learned about the at some point, I don't know if it was after we learned that the FBI had gotten hacked and all that stuff, and the notice went out, because really what happened was Mandiant found out that their vulnerability testing, their proprietary software to do penetration testing, that means go and try to poke holes and get into the system, was stolen. So they're like, ooh, oh crud. Now we got, this free range, our program out there that can get into people's systems. I guess.
And this program, Kimberly, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the program that our government uses to do red strike operations, to actually do what they call, I guess the majority of people would recognize as white hat hacking. So they're authorized hacks to go into the system and test vulnerabilities and cover their tracks. So this is software that's actually designed to be an undetectable hack utilized by our government. And that software got into the hands of the bad guys.
Yes, it did. And so
that's the
Mandiant went into a
software
panic.
they use to probe our election system.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry,
So,
I cut you off.
When Mandiant found out, everything, there was like it was a big hush hush thing, because SolarWinds obviously knew that their product was vulnerable back in July 2019 when they were talking to the FBI, and it just got dropped. And so then when they're all on a call together, when it finally comes out in November of 2020, November 6th, well, actually a little bit before November, they are on a call, and the FBI just nonchalantly mentions, oh yeah, we had that hack back in, and then of course CISA is like, what? nobody told us. And, they act like they didn't know. But SolarWinds had notified CISA back when the FBI had notified them. So it's a whole convoluted point in the fingers and why didn't you know kind of thing.
Well, now I have a question. I believe that I read somewhere when I was kind of prepping for the show that CISA had actually issued an alert to commercial organizations that there were vulnerabilities in the Orion system and that people should contact the company for patches for vulnerability, yet they didn't utilize those own patches themselves. So before they announced that they were hacked or supposedly had knowledge of the hacking, they had issued an alert about the hack.
Yep. And let me go over filling in a little bit of the timeline here. So November 10th was when Mandiant found out they had been hacked, and because of somebody had a multi-factor security authentication coming in, and they didn't recognize it from a phone. They didn't recognize, and the employee was not where the signal was coming from. And so that diligent security person went and reported that. The analyst went and reported that. And so they quietly start looking at, well, what is this? And that was like about the 17th of November. The 18th of November, of course, Trump fires Krebs at this point. And the 20th, Mandiant discovers that they have their software was stolen. Their white hat hacking software was stolen. So then they contact the NSA on the 21st, and the CEO of Mandiant calls the two cyber investigators that he knows to tell them to quietly investigate it. Don't say nothing, right? And then they end up finding that the security tools were stolen on December 8th of 2020. And then they find out on the December 11th that Orion's actually the culprit. So this whole time, they still don't know that it's Orion. These are these two researchers that don't know anything that's going on that with CISA and SolarWinds and the DOJ and all that stuff. And so get this, SolarWinds on the 12th brings in DL Piper, that's a BlackRock and Vanguard group, to investigate and have legal counsel, because now they're, in hot water, right? So, and Vanguard is the senior VP of CrowdStrike, which is Vanguard. Their counter advisory team was led by David Cohen, and they were investigating the break-in. And then the story breaks on the 13th. So they tried to hide it, and Mandiant said, I'm going public with this. So that's when CISA recognized it. When Mandiant said, I'm going public with this.
Right.
So until then, CISA was just going to bury it.
Well, that's, there's a lot of interesting things happening here at the end of 2020. And then especially as we get into January of 2021. And so sort of walking back a little bit, right? We have CISA goes out and actively works to get all of the states and counties into its security program, right? And during this time, CISA has been hacked, right? And so with respect to the elections, we have CISA hacked. It's running its software, its white hat hacker software, probing state and local election systems, correct? And then the hackers are watching everything CISA is doing. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
And so hackers can just go into any system they want.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Hackers can then just go into any system they want. They know where the vulnerabilities are,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about this hack. When they Volexity, when they were investigating the think tanks thing and then he kept digging into it, he found out that backdoor was placed in 2016. He finally traced it back to
2016.
2016.
Right.
So
Oh,
these
another
hackers, they put in a
presidential election
backdoor.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So they put in the backdoor and then they just wait. And
Right.
then they
Well,
go in
and
through the back door.
CIS and CISA, their primary job is to immediately identify these things so that they
Mm-hmm.
can mitigate damage. But yet
Mm-hmm.
these back, I'm going to call them backdoor portals because I don't know the technical term, but basically these hacks or vulnerabilities are put into the system and sit there for years before
Yes.
they're addressed,
Yep.
which is
And
exactly
and
opposite
I
of
would
what they
argue
claim.
that the hacker, they probably put in several backdoors.
Well, let
Because,
me ask you this.
if you get all in there, you're not going to want to just leave yourself vulnerable to one way in, right?
Uh,
So they probably put in several backdoors to be able to get in. And that's why Volexity couldn't shut them down because they had backdoors that they couldn't
Do
Right.
find.
do we know if all the
And so
doors are
CISA
closed?
would have had the same thing. And CISA came on they were, Chris Krebs was on one of the, like not a podcast, but like a panel or something. They were interviewing him on something, and he had said that once the hackers are in, they can do anything they want. And he goes, it will take years,
Yes.
years to mitigate this. So
And so
my
the
guess is that
people,
to this day, it's probably not mitigated.
the people at the in charge of this centralized system that govern all of our elections below, still to this day, right? They
Mm-hmm.
govern Runback. They Runback election services, right? Very
Mm-hmm.
active in elections in the swing states in the United States. They still likely have back doors where they can continue to
Yeah.
intrude into our system.
Right.
Yep.
And these can be foreign bad actors, but they can also be domestic bad actors, correct?
Well, as a matter of fact, that Orion hack happened on an Amazon server,
Yeah.
AWS server.
And what's
So
interesting
yeah.
is it's the same Amazon AWS servers that are the buffer between CIS and our election management systems
Yep.
with these Albert
Yep.
sensors.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were
Yep.
talking about that last week, those Albert sensors that are there to identify these hacks and these vulnerabilities are running through the same server that fed that
Mhm.
malicious code into Orion.
Yep.
And are these
Yep.
servers that the code was fed into Orion, are they supposed to be ultra super secure or something?
Yeah, you would think they were supposed to be super secure, but
Who,
no, they're not.
whose are they?
Whose servers are they? They're
Yeah.
Amazon's. I don't know. The cloud.
Oh,
Yeah,
It's an
it's mostly in
Amazon
the
cloud
cloud.
service.
Amazon Cloud Service.
Mhm.
Maybe you can order a backdoor on Amazon.
Steve,
Sure.
do you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
pull up that website? Let's pull up the IBM website that
Okay.
you were looking at earlier.
Yeah.
And let's take a look at that. So this is when they talk about the key systems that were taken offline from the CISA hack. This is for 2024 though, right?
Yeah, this is
Yeah. So we're going to get
another-
into that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is an additional hack into CISA.
Mhm.
And so if anybody wants, if anybody believes that your government can keep you safe and secure, don't believe it, because they can't. And there are a lot of malicious bad actors in your government who will take advantage of the power they have over you and the access they have over you to manipulate the system. So,
Yeah, you can pull that
Well,
down.
you know what's really funny is that Mandiant CEO did a talk about the SolarWinds hack. And he actually said, well, espionage is just a thing we have to deal with. It just is. And it's fair game. But they're not going to shut down. They don't want to control that, because that would mean then our government could not do espionage. So think about that. They choose to leave it open because they want to do espionage. And so,
Well,
and by
on that
risking
thought, I
Yeah.
want to share something. I think this is a perfect time to talk about the fact that Trump, in January of 2021, he said he believed that these SolarWind hacks were directed by China. But then the federal agencies, right, the national agencies came out in January 5th and issued a joint statement saying, no, this is a false narrative. It was Russia. Russia did it. They hacked the 2020 system, right? This is all Russia. But when you talk about the fact that America wants to still be able to play the espionage game, so to speak, Hillary Clinton called on some foreign actors to do some espionage, right?
Yeah, I think we got a video.
Yeah.
Wanna watch this video?
Let's do that.
This is a video. Hillary Clinton. I think it's with Rachel Madcow.
Yeah. Video 4, Steve. You can do video 4. Yeah.
You know, the only other adversary of ours who's anywhere near as good as the Russians is China. So why should Russia have all the fun? And since Russia is clearly backing Republicans, why don't we ask China to back us?
I hereby tonight ask China.
That's right. And not only that, China, if you're listening, why don't you get Trump's tax returns? I'm sure our media would richly reward you.
So the interview was done in 2019, right?
March of 2019, Hillary Clinton calls on China to hack American systems, our election system, and Trump's tax return.
Right. And Rachel Maddow agreed as well. Go ahead, Steve. Steve wants to do this.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Trump, do you think he should step in?
Donald Trump don't trust China. China is asshole.
That's funny. You know. Yeah, so this is sort of an interesting narrative that we're looking at in terms of this timeline we have. We have Hillary Clinton, right? She pushed what we now know and have known for a long time to be this false Russia narrative. She then calls on her friends in China to get involved in our election, right? To basically hack our election.
Trump, do you think he should step in?
Donald Trump don't trust China. China is asshole.
And she's doing this, right, just as all of this hacking begins to take place. Is that correct? And so it's interesting. Did you know that Hillary Clinton supported China's ascension to most favored nation status?
Oh, yeah.
Which is they get the best trade relationship we offer anybody else. And so, it's interesting that Joe Biden, now you watched the primary because you're political, right? Was Joe Biden chosen by Democratic voters?
No. 81 million votes my ass.
No, I mean in the primary.
No way.
Oh, in the primary. No, he wasn't.
Yeah, it was rigged for Joe Biden, wasn't it?
Too.
Yeah, it was rigged for Joe Biden, and in large part with the assistance of the Democratic Party leadership, which was very Hillary Clinton-esque friendly, right? And so they're pushing this Russian narrative while inviting China to partake in our election systems, and they're advancing a candidate that we know is bought and paid for by China, especially through his family tie. right? So this is all kind of interesting. So I digress. And
Well,
we're-
no, I think you're actually on the right track because they keep pushing, and we've talked about this, I think, in every single show. Russia, Russia, Russia. Suzanne Spalding, the National Security Agency, this whole narrative around the dangers of Russia
right.
and the influence of Russia and how Russia rigged the election against Trump or for Trump in 2016, how they believe Russia was the one that did the SolarWinds hack in an effort to rig the elections for Trump,
Right.
but they caught him, right? All of these narratives. But the reality is a government official, right, has now come out in favor of the fact that there is credible security documentation and evidence that China hacked the 2020 election or attempted to influence it.
That'd be John Ratcliffe, right?
Yeah, John Radcliffe.
Have you read his report, Kim?
No, not yet.
He issues this report, and this is another critical part of the timeline. Can you take a guess as what day he issues his report? You gave the date earlier of January 5. What happened on January 5?
January 5?
January 5 was
2020?
when the security agencies came out and declared that it was not China, it was Russia, and that they know it was like this USB. I don't remember the exact term they used. I have it somewhere, but the name of the Russian hacking agency that was behind SolarWinds.
Right. And John Ratcliffe's report comes out on January 7th. Right. And then
that's interesting.
sandwiched in between these two dates, we have the biggest effort to change the narrative in the history of the United States.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
We have January 6th.
Yep.
So the day before January 6th occurs, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security issue a joint statement with CISA stating Russia did it. January 6th happens. And then on January 7th, Radcliffe issues a report saying, no, China did it.
Yeah.
Right?
And so here's a paragraph. I just want to read part of Ratcliffe's report, because if you don't believe the Central Intelligence Agency is actively involved in U.S. politics and the media, then you're completely delusional, right? The ombudsman who was conducting part of this assessment, he found that the Central Intelligence Agency management took actions pressuring analysts to withdraw their support for the report saying China had hacked and been involved in election tampering within the United States in 2020, right? The Central Intelligence Agency's leadership, its management, had completely politicized this issue.
Director John McCone.
And to protect from the China narrative being exposed, they were putting pressure on analysts who are supposed to be completely unbiased, right? And they also found that there were a lot of people in the intelligence community who did not want to come out and say bad things about China.
Right.
Right.
Do you want to read that report about the CIA director, that paragraph?
I just talked about part of it, but is there anything else you want to see about it? And, we can put this up on I think it's all over Twitter.
Yeah, Steve, go ahead and put up 5B, because this is his final summary.
Right.
And I think this is important. He says, in the same spirit, I am adding my voice in support of the stated minority view based on all available sources of intelligence. So this isn't just some random guy. He has access to actual intelligence with definitions consistently applied and reached independent of political considerations or undue pressure that the People's Republic of China sought to influence the 2020 U.S. federal elections and raising the need for the intelligence community to address the underlying issues with China reporting outlined above. And Steve, yes, go ahead and do it.
Oh, good time.
Do you
for
think he
Congress.
should step in?
Donald Trump don't trust China. China is asshole.
I can't get enough of that.
No, it's funny. Well, another piece of the puzzle is that Iran hacked the registration databases. There were two guys that were actually convicted for hacking the 2020 registration databases. They did not come out with that until after Biden took office.
And
They-
so
they
it
hushed
was,
it
it was funny that all the lefties, all the lawyers running around out there saying, "Oh, it was all litigated and courts didn't find anything," right? But here we have
Yep.
our national intelligence agencies hiding information from not only the American public, but from attorneys who could litigate those very issues with respect to our elections. And so they hide it. It's too late to do anything about it. You can't challenge the election under state law any longer. And voila, it's all done. There, no court ever found anything wrong, right?
Well, I think we
Yep.
should run
Yep.
through a bunch of these different things.
Yeah.
We can go through them quickly, but I think it's important. They keep pushing this narrative that no election systems have been affected by any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And you can Google it and do the fact checks, and they'll tell you, oh, but election systems weren't part of this, and election systems weren't part of that. But there were instances where they can't hide it. Steve, put up number 6. So December of 29th of 2015. So this is pre-2016 election. A Texas researcher found online a database of 191 million voters that were on the open internet. Now, some people might say, okay, well, this could be a political organization, a tech organization, but they actually reached out to a lot of these database organizations that help support political parties and campaigns. And the coding on this was nothing like those. This was actual data from the counties, and every county or state houses its own data. So this had to be either compiled very meticulous over a course of a very long period of time, or they were able to hack into a system that has access to 191 million American voters across 50 states. You can take that.
Yeah, and it very clearly happened. I mean, it exposed voters' information, voters from all 50 states. And so, that's just, that's going back to prior to the 2016 election. And so this stuff happens, and it happens, it would seem fairly routinely, but, your government who's here to help, and make things all better doesn't want you to know about it.
Well, not at all. Another thing, I think a lot of people, we focus a lot on Arizona because we're from Arizona. A lot of people may not realize in 2016, there was a Maricopa County hack. Steve, put up number 7, if you would, please. So this was another data.
I'm just going to put out a plug here because we're not all Arizona residents. I want to put out a plug. There is a recall movement going forward in Alaska. If you want to sign a petition to remove Senator Murkowski from her divinely appointed Senate seat, which she inherited from her father, please sign the petition, and let's get rid of Lisa Murkowski, because Lisa Murkowski does not have the best interests of Alaska at her heart.
I think Lisa Murkowski used a private personal email and coordinated with States United, right? Wasn't she on that list?
Was she on that list?
I'd have to double check. I bet you she was. I
Yeah,
mean, they
I'd have
all
to
were.
double check.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's check that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve. Put up number 7. Okay, so Illinois and Arizona's election database, their voter registration system, was hacked. That was announced August 30th of 2016. And they even state that when they took the system offline to review the vulnerabilities, they discovered that a county election official's username and password have been posted online publicly, and that it was believed that the workers may have inadvertently downloaded a virus which exposed the username and password. They say, well, it didn't affect the whole statewide system, only the county of Maricopa
Right.
and another county in Illinois. But this is an admission where the FBI alerted the Arizona Department of Administration that their voter registration system was hacked. Go ahead and take that down. Oh, and I don't know if you caught it, but it says Russia did it.
Russia did it. Russia did it.
Russia
Did it.
Russia did it.
There's
Okay.
something
I spilled my
interesting that I
coffee.
wanted
Russia
to
did
say, because the timeline, when you lay it out, Arizona and Illinois, their registration database is hacked in 2016. Of course, we already know Susan Spalding knew in 2011 registration databases were the weak link. So the hack happens. CISA gets 2018 registration databases are hacked again, and that was based on something I found on Vote Shield. We talked about that a couple episodes ago. So Vote Shield and Ballot Shield were specifically developed to monitor counties' registration databases and their early votes.
Right.
So I mean,
Okay, so let's
go
walk
down
through
to
this.
record level.
Kimberly, real quick, and then we'll go right back
Uh-huh.
to your point. So December of 2015, a researcher discovers all of this data from all 50 states compiled and put into a database illegally. In 2016, the FBI admits, and Maricopa County and Illinois admit that their voter registration databases were hacked. And then you said Vote Shield talks about 2018 hack. So what's the theme here? We have 2016, we have 2018, right? So we're kind of creating a pattern here.
Yep.
So what happened in 2018?
In 2018, registrations were found to be hacked, and so DHS gave Vote Shield $2.2 million to create this monitoring system to monitor changes on the election or the registration databases.
Where were they in
And
Arizona in 2022 when we had significant number of voter registration changes that disenfranchised?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. They weren't doing a very good job.
Right. Well, they're
and-
just like
Yeah.
CISA and CIS. They
Right.
don't do a very good job. It's almost like they create these non-governmental organizations to give people this feeling of security while they're
That's exactly what it is.
using them for nothing more than cover while their systems are hacked. That makes sense? Does that sound
Yep.
plausible?
Well, look, if you look at the fact that these agencies know, they have foreknowledge.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you're looking at CISA, who knew about the issue
Right.
leading up to the election and waited until post-election. But not only that, simultaneously continued to enroll election
Yep.
Right.
counties and agencies into their software while it had an active vulnerability. Well, so I'm sorry if, maybe people think I have a tinfoil hat,
Right.
but I believe that's not a coincidence.
My hair's made of tinfoil. And
Now,
so,
have you guys
it's
Have you guys seen? There's a guy online. His name is Christopher Porter. He worked with CISA at the time. He was the Wait, he might not have worked with CISA, but he was an analyst that analyzes all these intrusions and things. And he said China hacked our election, interfered, and
Yeah.
they fired him because he would not go along with their narrative that it was Russia, Russia, Russia. And then they
Right.
buried it. And now it's all coming out. So,
Well, the truth
act-
shall set you free.
So they didn't come out publicly until December of 2020 about the CISA hack.
Yep.
Whether that was, we'll just set aside, as you said, there was pressure put on them by an actual commercial company saying, if you don't, I will. Right? But in October, did they claim, let me rewind, they claim there was no evidence that it affected voter rolls. However,
Right.
in October of 2020, Maricopa County gets hacked again. Steve, put up number 8, if you would, please. So here's what we know about the hack, it says, okay? They're claiming that it was public voter data that got hacked. They had come out and spun a narrative a little after this occurred, stating that it was just a flash drive with data that was public records. However, if you look at the paragraph at the bottom, it said the addresses of protected voters are not public record, but the hackers stole them during the incident. So they admit that it was a hack. And Stephen Richer mailed letters to the protected voters saying your protected information got released through this hack. So for them to claim it was not a hack, but yet admit that the protected voters were left vulnerable, it's contrary. In addition, again, Jen Feifeld, not always on our side. I don't want to promote her, but she did a pretty good job with this. And she said the 243 withheld emails were sent by or received by Maricopa County. She tried to get public records, and they told her that there were 243 emails exchanged between Scott Jared, Adrian Fontes, Ray Valenzuela that had the word breach, security, unauthorized information or records in it. 243 that they refused to make public because of an ongoing investigation. Go ahead and pull that down, Steve.
So Jen
That tells
Fifield,
they were
doesn't
worried.
get records. How sad. Hey, Jen Fifield, if you want to support our cause to liberate the Public Records Act in the state of Arizona, we'll support your cause to do the same. You're media, after all, and you should be standing up for the right for not only the news media but for the people to get public records rather than just hiding in the shadows because Trump supporters are trying to get records.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, we support her right for those public records, right?
Yeah.
So we would hope, Jen, you will do the same for us because we should all have open, equal access to our public records. So we know there was a hack in 16. We know there was a hack in 18. We know there was a hack in 2020. Okay. June 15th of 2023, they discover another hack. Steve, can you put up number 9?
These hacks are getting so tiresome.
So CISA response comes on progress support. The U.S. confirms that makes the software exploited by the hackers, that it had discovered a second vulnerability in the code that the company was working to fix. So this is another vulnerability that came out June 15th of 2023. Now, this doesn't specifically address any hacks occurring in 2022, but it continues to go on to say that vulnerability was already in place, right? And it was an opportunistic software to break into networks. Go ahead and pull that down,
Well,
Steve.
look, hold on.
Oh, hold on. Leave it up.
The second paragraph should be in big red, bold, huge letters. The Department of Energy. What do they deal with?
All kinds of stuff.
Nuclear
power. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so, that's our entire electrical. It's interesting because a lot of companies have stopped importing Chinese transformers. Right.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is China has developed a backdoor into its transformers that would allow China to come into our transformers and shut our power supply. Right. And so, China has done so much of this in an effort to get access to and control over U.S. computer infrastructure that we should never have another computer involved in our elections again, let alone all of these non-governmental agencies that are simply sitting there and not doing their job. Was
Right.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
pull
ahead.
it down.
Okay.
know,
So,
some
you
of
got
the
anything to
reader,
add
I
on
mean,
that?
some of the viewers might not understand that when these hacks occur. Okay, the SolarWinds hack was a really big deal. I can't say that enough because one, it showed that the hacker can get into a system, they can get into use the company's own compiler. So the company does their security that's monitoring their system doesn't even know that they're in there because they've created that backdoor comes in and they create a VPN. It's basically a highway between the company's computer and somebody else's computer, could be halfway around the country or around the corner. Doesn't matter. Creates a highway, and that highway, the system thinks that it's authorized access. And the SolarWinds hack also proved that they can get around multi-factor authentication. Like you have to text a number to say, yeah, that was me, and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
It proved they can get around that. So that means no company is safe. No systems are safe.
Well,
They will.
well.
They
Speaking
will
of
get
that,
into.
there was a huge recent hack, wasn't there, that involved Google, it involved Apple, and it involved what, billions of people around the globe. That
yeah.
their personal information, their usernames, their passwords were all stolen.
Mhm.
And how many people will actually take the time to go through and change their passwords? Right. And that's
Yeah,
part of
whole
the
day to do
problem.
mine.
Most won't. And so if Google, you would think, Google is supposed to be a very highly secure company, right? That hides or stores your information in the cloud on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
And what they claim is, that it's spread out throughout the cloud, so it's not all on one server. So it's not like Kamala Harris said, our data is up here just floating around in little bits, and every now and then they'll make clouds and rain. And so they're actually on servers sitting in somebody's office, and and so Google portends to be one of the more secure companies in the world. It's Apple, don't they? They have some very intensive security software that even the federal government has difficulties getting into people's
Yep.
phones, right? And if these people can be hacked and all of our data and information stolen, what, Maricopa County, CISA's peanuts. I mean, CISA's getting
Right.
hacked all
Well,
the time.
and here's the issue, and I think it kind of lends to what Kimberly's point is. CISA or CIS, right? If we talk about the Albert sensors,
Right.
and when they sign up for these services, they literally are built into their servers as a safe intruder,
Mhm.
essentially, right? So it's like if anybody's ever gone on their computer and they put in a website and then the website alerts and says, we don't believe this is safe or the security certificate has expired. You can actually enter that website onto your computer so that moving forward, whether it's safe or not, your computer is going to automatically say it's safe. So to all of these systems, CISA is safe. They literally are encoded to be an allowed intruder into the system.
Right.
So when the intruder itself is the one carrying the malicious
Right.
software and bringing that vulnerability, yes, exactly, Steve. It's a Trojan horse. Because
So,
all of these,
yeah.
I mean, the systems are saying, oh, it's just CISA.
Yeah, so your machine starts spitting out 19-inch ballots. Why? I don't know.
And think about this.
Right.
The Velexity security firm confirmed that Orion hack happened back in 2016.
Yeah.
So this is just my opinion. There's nothing that has come out to confirm it or whatever. And my opinion is that considering CISA's lack of forthrightness, I believe they probably had that hack in their system since 2016.
Probably.
And it laid
You mean they're
undetected.
gaslighting? They're straight up lying to the American public. They're straight up actively working to recruit our elections departments into their hacked and corrupt system.
Well, they're still recruiting, right? And they're still trying to get everybody to trust them. Trust us. We're from the government. We're here to help. Right?
Yeah.
But what happened March of 2024? Steve put up number 10.
And while he's doing that, Kimberly, I know you remember the video of Susan Spalding when she's on a podcast talking about what she did on the day Trump was sworn in, right?
Yeah.
No, just leave it up.
No,
Steve. You remember that? She was dismayed
She was
and sad.
distraught.
Yeah. She's the mother of CISA. All right. Sorry about that. Back to our
Okay.
exhibit.
So hackers breached the Systems of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. So another breach? CISA declined to answer a range of questions about who was behind the incident, whether data had been accessed or stolen, and what systems were taken offline. But they're claiming the impact was limited to only 2 systems, so don't worry about it. So you've got this major cybersecurity and infrastructure agency who has their fingers in just about everything across the United States. And they're saying, it's okay, we took the 2 systems offline, everything's good, and really we don't think anything occurred. It's okay.
Trust us. You know what's funny is because the State Bar of Arizona did a CLE. I was watching a CLE one day, and they were telling attorneys to sign up with CISA to have them probe their law firm. Right? Can you imagine exposing your client data?
Talk about a breach of attorney-client privilege, right?
Well, I mean, talk about wholly and completely unethical for you to sign up with a system that has been corrupted for so long, and that if anybody can get into your law firm and steal your client's personal information, that should be subject to disbarment, completely 100%, because CISA is not protecting people. It's not doing what they said it was going to do. It's doing the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
And so if you're an attorney out there, do not invite this company to probe your systems. Find somebody credible to do it.
Steve, you wanted to...
Yeah, at some point, you just kind of got to think to yourself, if CISA and SolarWinds are this easily hacked, and they're hacked at such a regular interval that you can't help but wonder if it's intentional.
Well, that's why.
If the hacks are actually baked into the system.
Yeah, that's why. Go to the board real quick.
Well, hold on. Before we do this, I want to point this out. This is a quote from an official at CISA. This is a reminder that any organization can be affected by cyber vulnerability, and having an incident response plan in place is a necessary component of resilience. So if they can hack us, they can hack anybody. So just be prepared.
Right.
Okay, go ahead and pull it down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
Did you want the board?
Yeah, go to the board real quick. And I think this is important to what you said here. I like this. What I like to show. CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, the CIS. What's it stand for again?
Center for Information Security.
Internet Security, right? And then CISA, the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, folks. These organizations, yeah. There you go. Yeah. So the problem is, and the Central Intelligence Agency, according to this report from John Ratcliffe that we were looking at, has obviously been very heavily politicized and is obviously very pro-China. And I would say the same is probably true for the U.S. Department of State, which I think is nothing more than the publicity arm of the Central Intelligence Agency these days. And so you have these very pro-China elements of our government that will do anything to destroy their enemies, Russia, right? And to have their will, electorally and with the U.S. political system. So
Yeah. Well, and Steve had mentioned, okay, we've got CISA that's obviously vulnerable. We've got SolarWinds, obviously vulnerable. They talk about Avanti as a vulnerability. But what about what happened in 2024 with CrowdStrike?
I was
Do
just
you guys
gonna say
remember the
that.
CrowdStrike outage?
yeah.
Steve, put up
Yep.
number 11. So we have this CrowdStrike outage that shut down surgical centers. It shut down airplanes. People were stranded at airports. And it shut down the Arizona election operation because CrowdStrike is the software that runs the e-poll books. So
The Falcon is the
Yeah.
product from CrowdStrike. Yeah.
So here's what's interesting. I love this article, and I want to point this out. It says, Maricopa County site books, which allow voter check-ins, were impacted by the outage, as relayed through the county online and to various reporters. Site books operate through a virtual private network and aren't closed and air-gapped. That prompted questions about our election system's connection to the internet and past statements that the systems are not connected to the internet. Richer again maintained the check-in system have internet connection, but not tabulation equipment. Okay, go ahead and pull that down.
Well, I'm looking on my phone right here at CrowdStrike, and it says CrowdStrike is a global cybersecurity leader with an advanced cloud-native platform for protecting endpoints, right? And then it goes on to say, the AI native cybersecurity platform, right? So they're pushing AI, artificial intelligence, right? And this is. Did you see the story that came out recently about what's the AI on Twitter?
Grok.
I think it was Grok. That they're saying that Grok is consuming so much bad information that it's literally destroying itself. Right? It's
Yeah.
It's like Americans today, right? They eat all the food they want that causes the cancer that then kills them. And so it was a kind of an interesting story. but yeah.
Do you guys remember, what was it? Short Circuit with Johnny Five. Need more input.
Need more input. Need more. Right? Trash in, trash out.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But
So,
You know, the
here's the
interesting
thing.
thing about all of this also is that, and I don't know if the viewers know this, but the footprint can be spoofed. So CISA could say, "Oh, it looks like it was Russia," but it can be spoofed to look like Russia.
right.
It could have been, you know, China,
Yeah, well, and
Iran.
you know,
Anyway.
who are they going to blame? I mean, they want the United States to go to war against Russia. So who do you blame? Blame Russia.
Yep.
Right.
You blame
You
Russia,
don't
just like
blame.
CrowdStrike did that for Hillary's emails. They blamed
Right.
Russia.
They blame.
Well, and
Russia.
you're certainly
Nobody confirmed that.
Was it CrowdStrike involved in Hillary Clinton's emails?
Yeah, they're the ones that investigated the
Oh,
incident
yeah.
and said that
Yeah,
Russia was the
investigated.
one that hacked her emails. But the FBI and nobody in the federal government looked at it. They took CrowdStrike's word for it.
Yeah. Well, you know, and most of the people that work in these corporations, security corporations or non-governmental organizations, formerly worked where? FBI,
in the government. Yeah.
Department of
Yep, yep.
Justice, Department of Defense, right? And so they're all tied into this huge national security network in the military industrial complex, right?
Well, and if I'm a very influential politician, right, and I'm asking a country to hack something,
Right.
obviously I'm going to ask my friends to divert attention elsewhere. Right? It's like if you go and you know, you go and break into a warehouse on G Street and then you tell the
Yeah.
cops, "Oh, I saw him running that way down H Street. I'm sure he was there,"
Yeah.
right? I mean, you have Hillary Clinton calling for China to hack our elections and then they're like, "No, it can't be China." And the CIA director McCone says, "No, I disagree with that analysis, and that cannot be signed off on. It was not China. Whatever you do, don't look here. Look over there. Look over there at Russia. We can't look here at China.
Right.
China didn't do it."
And then Mr.
Well, then-
China becomes president of the United States.
Well, and then January 6th
report-
happens and the
Yeah.
whole narrative changes, right?
Yeah, you know, and then the report gets buried on January 7th.
Yep.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, this might be a little naive of me or an oversimplification, but like we were talking about earlier, I feel like this is a global version of the WWF where, you know, I mean, China and Russia are long-standing allies. They have a lot of the same interests.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and I think people like Hillary Clinton and others that speak with China or anyone else, it's like this big group of people that are like, hey, you're going to be the boogeyman for this, all right? We're going to Russia, we're going to use you to be the scary boogeyman that's sided with the Republicans, and China, we're going to try to hold you up, put you on a pedestal and just keep that money coming, you know?
Yep.
But behind closed doors, they're all shaking hands and going to the same country clubs.
Well,
It's
you know,
a sham.
That could very well be, but you know, at the same time, I think that China and Russia might have some unholy alliance because we are their common interest.
Right.
Right. The United States is their common interest. And
Yeah.
so, you know, you also probably have China and Russia pushing each other under the bus all the time.
But it is funny. I mean,
Yeah.
like Steve said, historically, China and Russia are considered allies.
Yeah.
You know, these long allies, and they're like, well, the Russia side is influencing for Republicans, and the China side is influencing for Democrats.
Hey, Steve, let's bring this up real quick so we can just sort of get I don't know, the CISO, the website.
That would be website number 3.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've seen this, Kim, but this is the CISA website. And so I just want to if you think your computer systems are safe, folks, if you think your election systems are safe, yeah, go ahead. You've got a lot to think about. This is CISA, right? The Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency's very own website, and it talks about significant cyber incidents. And so, can we zoom that a little bit so it gets a little bigger?
Well, wait a
I'm
minute.
old. I
This
can't
is
read that.
CSIS.
It's like
This is Spalding's.
100 miles away.
This one's Susan Spalding's
Okay,
group.
scroll down.
Yeah.
May 2023, the Czech Republic attributed a cyber attack targeting in foreign ministry to China.
That's 25. That
Was
was
that
May of
2025?
this year.
See,
Yeah.
it's so far away, I can't read it.
He's going to try and unfreeze it. It's not wanting to move for him.
You know, another couple fun facts. We just learned that China, that they had talked about, they found out that China had produced a bunch of fraudulent driver's licenses. And CISA was trying to
Right.
say, oh, there's no evidence that anything has been done. Well, maybe that wasn't their goal. Maybe their goal was to get registration databases so they could create driver's licenses.
Right.
People.
Well, and that's what's interesting is that sounds a lot like that Garrett Archer guy, right? All he really does is say, "Oh, it's not true."
Yep.
Right? Yeah, go ahead and pull it down. So we're looking at it right here. So, a Turkish espionage group exploited a vulnerability in a message app to spy on Kurdish military forces operating in Iraq. The UK's National Cybersecurity Centre named China as the dominant threat to national cybersecurity, and a series of hacks and involving the British government departments and critical infrastructure, including alleged attacks against the Electoral Commission and members of Parliament. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you think your elections are safe using these systems,
look at this one here. April 2025, U.S. Cyber Command discovers Chinese malware implanted on partner networks of Latin American nations.
Oh, on partner networks of Latin American nations, right? And so, we work very closely with Latin American nations on military issues, right? North Korean cyber spies are expanding their infiltration operations to target European defense and government organizations. If you read this list, folks.
Oh, look at this. The attackers used PowerShell and Dropbox for command and control and data exfiltration. How many people use Dropbox, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I pulled everything off of Dropbox a long time ago.
Look, here's another one that used Dropbox. I know some of our government offices are using Dropbox.
No, a lot of lawyers use Dropbox because that's how they'll transfer files and information, discovery.
Right
and
here,
other
3
documents.
different occasions
Right.
on this one page, they used Dropbox to implant these malicious attacks.
Right.
So, if I think the viewers need to understand too that CISA admitted that in 2020, when the systems were hacked, that they found SQL code left behind. Now, for anybody that doesn't understand the significance of that, the databases for all of our systems are ran on SQL. It's an SQL database. And so if they've got SQL code in there, it's really simple to manipulate the data on the voter rolls.
So if anybody wants to look at this website, go through and look. You will literally see defense departments, militaries. these people, folks, the military and the defense industry, they take security very seriously. In fact, they kill people to keep secrets, but they're getting hacked. And so, what's to stop them from hacking your elections if they want to change the outcome of who governs the United States of America?
So I just put the link to the website under our live on the We the People Twitter. So if you're interested in looking, the link to the site is there for you to review. You would just, it's amazing.
And
The list goes on and on and on and on.
You know what you probably won't find in there are all the significant hacks of CISA itself.
Right.
They'll probably leave that out.
So,
Right.
it brings us back to the idea of we're asking organizations like ES&S, who creates voting equipment, we're asking places like county and state elections departments, places like Runback, and all of these people that operate our critical infrastructure and election related systems. Please sign up with SIS. Let us put these sensors on your servers. Let us run these vulnerability tests. Just trust us. We're going to protect you. This is our top priority. While simultaneously, they can't even protect themselves. If you start looking at some of these articles, not CrowdStrike, SolarWinds being one of the most prominent, by the time they discovered the vulnerability, it had already been in place for years.
Yep.
Which means they could have written in there 100, 1,000 backdoors, many different windows and opportunities to remain in that system for eternity unless there's a complete flush of the entire system and rebuild, right?
Yep.
And this is a recurring theme. They're supposed to protect us, but that doesn't really happen. And we talked last week about the Albert sensors. Steve, will you put up number 14? I want to reiterate this because it all falls in line. You now have counties, thank God, that are withdrawing from CIS and the Albert sensors because they say it's not doing what they promised it to do and it's asking for too much. So there was a ransomware attack in Washington State, in one of the counties, Lincoln County, and they found out they were a victim but never got alerted by CIS that they were intruded on.
Oh my God.
It didn't prevent the attack. It didn't mitigate the attack. It did nothing. In addition, they want full access to their network and full control over any changes to their network. And Lincoln County said, no, we're not going to give you the keys to the kingdom if we know you're going to leave our front door wide open. Go ahead and take that down, Steve.
And that's just one.
And then you got
That's just one
Fontes that's
county with a
arguing
proper
that
response.
he was writing wanting CISA security staff. He was upset that Trump took that away, and now they're trying to get the budget to create their own CISA in the county.
Right.
Well, and the unfortunate thing is, thank God for legislators like Alex Culloden, who fought with the grassroots and with our organization to stop that terrible bill in the state of Arizona. But here's the unfortunate thing. Adrian Fontes is still getting the funding through the federal government to enact the exact same systems. So even if we block it at the state level, we've got these federal grants coming in through the EAC, coming in through CIS and all these different agencies that are bypassing the will of the citizens. And this is the big issue. If we can't control our elections and control the laws around our elections, these people will keep doing what they're doing.
Well, and here's the thing. I go back to this. If we were voting at a precinct level in person with a photo ID and we're hand counting at the precinct, we wouldn't need any of that. Just think of all the money we'd be saving on machines and cybersecurity and all of that.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's an interesting segue, Kimberly,
Right.
Yeah.
because we have instances where precincts, counties, not precincts, counties have tried to do hand counts, who
Mhm.
want to do hand counts, and they're being lied to, they're being threatened, and they're being sued and controlled by the county attorneys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by not just county attorneys, but one of the biggest protagonists in this effort to ensure that America is dependent upon computerized elections and hence continued hacking is your your hack AG. I forgot my button. What the hell's my
Chris
button?
Mays.
Chris Mays. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
where's
so
your Chris
you
Mays
know,
button?
do we have a letter from Chris Mays that she sent to counties?
No. What we have is the Brnovich opinion on the Cochise
Okay.
County.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and so Chris Mays is running around, working overtime to bully boards of supervisors throughout the state of Arizona, not to represent their voters, right? But to ensure that they maintain computerized voting systems in their counties. And they're saying it's actually against the law to get rid of your election voting machines, whatever they are. But it's not, in my humble opinion. And so boards of supervisors out there need to do something about it.
So Attorney Brnovich put an opinion out
Mm-hmm.
that municipalities, specifically like state bodies,
Right.
had the right to do expansive audits, and that the guidelines in legislation only tells you what the minimum is,
Right.
but it doesn't prevent expanding that, right?
Mhm.
And that was surrounding Cochise County. Cochise County wanted to do a hand count audit, and they were sued, right? They were sued, and then Chris Mays,
Mark Elias.
Mhm. and Chris Mays reversed that opinion. So she actually came out and said, I disagree with Brnovich's opinion. So I'm going to put out my own opinion. And I'm trying to pull that up right now. But do you want to give a little more background on what happened in Cochise while I do that?
Well, basically, what happened is a lot of voters in Cochise County were, pretty concerned about the way their elections were being handled, and the outcome of their elections, and so they were calling on their board of supervisors to do a hand count of ballots. And the ultimate question of the day is, why cannot the people whose elections they are get together as a collective whole and hand count their ballots? Why does anybody have a problem with that? Why would you fear that? That's the ultimate question. But of course, they were sued by Mark Elias and his left wing friends to prevent them from being able to do a complete audit. And so, the AG is now of the position that you can't do it, and it's
But
criminal
it
if
goes
you do.
beyond that, right?
Yeah.
So in Cochise County, they were trying to do a full hand count audit,
Right.
not a hand count. There's a difference.
A hand count audit.
Right. So the courts ruled no against that. They said,
Yes.
no, you can't use tabulators and then do an expansive full hand recount.
Mhm.
But Chris Mays went a step further and she said, you cannot conduct a hand count audit or a hand count of early mail in ballot.
Right.
You just can't do hand count. Just don't count ballots.
And so the issue before the court, the Cochise County matter, was, of course, the audit. Can you conduct an audit by a full audit of all ballots by hand, right? And so what the court did was it looked at Arizona revised statutes, and we have some of them. I think we're going to pull up, don't we?
Yeah, we absolutely
and so
do.
Why don't you pull up 443 real quick? Number 17.
While he's doing that, I want to talk about 443
Uh-huh.
because we have Board of Supervisors in Maricopa County,
Mhm.
and we have attorneys in other counties in the state of Arizona that are touting that ARS 16443 prohibits
Right.
the removal of tabulators and hand count elections. So we have Board of Supervisors who are out running PowerPoint saying 16443 prohibit hand count.
Mm.
So, Steve, can you
Interesting.
put up number 17?
The language of 16443 would beg to differ. And it basically says at all state, county, city, or town elections, agricultural improvement district elections, and primary elections, ballots or votes may be cast, recorded, or counted by voting or marking devices and vote tabulating devices as provided in this article. The operative word in that sentence, folks, is may. And when courts interpret statutes, they look at the operative language. They will not read out the word may. Because what does may mean?
Can.
You can if you want, if you
Right.
elect to. If you, as the Board of Supervisors, wish to use electronic voting and tabulating devices, you may do so. It's authorizing members of the Board of Supervisors
To choose.
approve the use of voting machines if they and their voters so desire. It's not a mandate. It's as far from a mandate as you get, right? And so what the court was looking at then was a collection of other statutes because the legislature, when they passed for 16443, also passed several other statutes to go along with it that deal specifically with electronic voting machines. So if you're a county and you elect if you elect to use
choose
machines,
to use a tabulator,
right,
then
then
here's the guideline.
these are the rules you have to follow. And so what the appellate court held in the Cochise County matter was that because Cochise County had previously elected to use tabulators, electronic devices to count ballots, that they had to follow the statutes governing the auditing of elections using those tabulators, right?
And this is being convoluted.
It's totally convoluted.
People are claiming that the courts have ruled hand counts illegal.
Right.
But the issue brought before the court was never about the use of hand counts versus tabulators.
Mm-mm.
It was only about the scope of an audit.
Right. And so I think we have that one paragraph, number 16.
Yes, this is paragraph 19 of the appeals court ruling in the Cochise County matter. You can pull that up, Steve.
And it says, it talks about, sort of who has the power to make law. The legislature, according to the Constitution, has the power to make law. It says they exercise that power when they allowed for or they included statutes regarding the auditing of electronic voting results in Title 16. In Title 16, the Arizona revised statutes govern elections in the state of Arizona. And so the court says accordingly, because, they use tabulators, the county was required to follow the procedures for an audit mandated by the plain language of Section 16602, which lays out how an audit will take place. Those statutes only apply if you use electronic voting device.
Right. So they only apply once they've initiated and used the tabulator. Right.
And why is that?
Yeah, because they may.
Because she just read my mind, Kim.
They may what, Brian? Do a hand count.
They may, not use electronic voting and tabulating equipment, but they may use electronic voting and tabulating equipment if they so desire. Arizona, you boards of supervisors out there, you need to get off your butts. You need to challenge Chris Mays and her erroneous interpretation of Arizona law. You need to vote for what your constituents want you to do. And I would guarantee you in large measure across the state of Arizona and many other states that what voters want is to get these corrupted systems out of our elections. Because if CISA, the person who has complete control over or access to all election infrastructure throughout the entire United States of America, including private companies, ES&S and ES&I and Runbeck and all of these other voting machine companies and all of our elections departments throughout the United States of America, including Maricopa County, including Yuma County, Arizona, including Mojave County. Yep, I'm calling on you former Marine, to come out and rally your troops and get them to vote to hold elections that re-involve the people of the state of Arizona in the election process, the managing of the election process, and get rid of these machines because they are readily corrupted and corruptible. So with that, I guess might be my final words for the night.
Yeah, so before we wrap up, I want to bring something forward. Searcy County in Arkansas did a hand count, and God bless them. They did that. They worked with one of our partner orgs, avii.org, which is Arkansas Voter Integrity Initiative. They've been very supportive of our hand count method. They've been promoting it. And components of our hand count method was used in the Searcy County election. There has been, 4 days ago, there was a Gateway Pundit article that was released. I challenge you to please go check it out. It's by Brian Lupo, Gateway Pundit, and it's hand-marked, hand-counted Arkansas Election Commission. Okay, they actually decommissioned these commissioners that chose to do the hand count, and they banned them from serving as commissioners for a period of 14 years. And there was a series of public records that were released that showed that Governor Huckabee and others within the government of Arkansas actually exchanged emails of disinformation about what occurred in that hand count. And so it's a really good article. They are trying to stop the hand count. And I believe, and this is my opinion, they want to stop the hand count because it can't be hacked, because it can't be cheated, because it is what it is.
Yep.
And also they want to prevent us from having better access to our voter rolls, because they want to be able to hack that and manipulate that too. And until we fight and change this, they're going to continue to pass laws and regulation and falsities trying to make it illegal for us to use paper ballots, hand counts, and we've got to push back. We've got to push back. The officials that are against this, they are terrified by Trump's executive order, the 14248. They're fighting back, and they're starting to scramble to pass laws that are completely opposed to the hand count. And so be vigilant. And like Brian said, if you are a commissioner out there in any state, if you are a board of supervisor in any state, and you have the authority to act on behalf of the voters, we encourage you, challenge the system and do a hand count. Show the people that it can be done, that you have the authority to do it, and do what's right by the American people. Because right now, we are allowing our elections to be circumvented
Corrupted.
and corrupted. Yes. And so that's my final rant. Kimberly, go for it. What's your final rant?
I'll let you go
My
because I
final
got one
rant
more.
is that I agree with you, Shelby. I think the bureaucracy, the system, wants to keep the machines the way they are, and whether they know it or they don't know it, I don't know. But one of the indicators that tells me that they possibly know what's going on, because I don't see how these hacks can happen, and they just don't get it. They're obviously not very good at their job or whatever. It's intentional. And Chris Krebs was on a interview, and he said that he would not allow our systems to be put on blockchain, our voting system, not in his time frame. Now, blockchain is like a super secure way to be able to keep data from both ends, and so it doesn't change. And it's a real secure way, a way to handle data. And think about that. Chris Krebs says, no way was I going to let our election systems go on blockchain. So he did not want to have a secure way to transfer data. That tells you all you need to know.
Yeah.
Well, and let's bring clarity to that, Kimberly. When you're talking about blockchain in our elections, you're not advocating for blockchain voting. You're advocating for using the technology to secure the voter rolls. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, right. And well, blockchain voting can happen too, because you can vote. It'll never happen now.
No blockchain
It'll
election.
never happen now, and we don't want to do that because we can't see it, and that's where we're having the problems right now. We've got black box voting, but if we had an honest system that we could trust, then blockchain would be very secure. And we could use blockchain to secure our registration databases and everything else. But why don't they want to? And no, I'm not advocating for blockchain voting, because right now no. We need to go back to a simple hand count. It works. Been working for 100 years. And what's that country that uses the ink blot on their thumb? They put thumb in the ink. So
a lot of countries do.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of countries do.
So you go and you get yourself a little blue thumb and
right. And then
they
know if you go back to vote again, they know you already voted, so they boot you out.
Yep.
It's like the die packs when you steal money from a bank.
Right.
You're discarded. You voted. It was like
right.
Yeah.
Well, I got one last rant, but first, before I have this rant, I want to say thank you for being back, because you always provide wonderful and excellent information. So thank you.
Thank you.
And your light's not on though.
you
My
are
God. You got to figure out how to get that light working. But I want to say this is not a partisan issue, right? If the elections in 2020 were hacked on behalf of Joe Biden and the Democrats, the same can be done to you, right? This isn't a partisan issue.
No.
This should be an issue that all Americans care about, because if we can be hacked, so can you.
Amen. And I believe they have been.
Yeah.
I believe that they pick and choose the winners regardless of political affiliation. And I think that there are Democrat candidates out there that have been robbed just as much as any Republican candidate. I mean, Bernie Sanders is good proof that,
Right.
the will of the people isn't always the solution. Or what about the fact that they just chose to install Kamala Harris as their candidate, right? So, well, thank you, Kimberly. You are an invaluable part of this team. We love having you on. I cannot believe how much you can retain about solar winds and hacking information. Awesome. So, thank you so much.
Okay.
We'll see you next time.
You guys have a good night.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Good night.
Well, I think that wraps it up, don't you?
I think so. By God, I even shut my mic off while you were saying that. I was already done.
All
Steve
right,
got something?
Producer Steve has a final rant, and then we're going to call it out.
Trump, do you think he should step in?
Donald Trump don't trust China. China is asshole.
All right.
Don't trust China. China is asshole.
And with that, have a wonderful night.